Could you edit these things?
I do. We edit extensively.
Yeah, we have to when especially when we're free flowing.
Wait until
Although it's not as bad as it used to be.
No, but wait until we get video.
Oh.
Because unless I put a black bar over your face, I can't read his lips. Mm-hmm. All right. It's Thursday. I just
put a sack over my head.
Yes. Behind a curtain.
Like the bad guy from Batman.
Well, it's Leadership Thursday. We're with Terry and Nick, and we're talking about stuff that typically fire professionals who work in offices might be concerned about, but also if you're riding the right front seat, you're in charge of a company. We just want this to be more of leadership talk comparative to when we talk a lot of tactics on Tuesdays. So good to have you guys here as usual. How's it going, Terry, with your retirement? How are you settling into that? Your new job and everything else.
Yeah. So, 45 years in the fire service, the last 15, having a place to show up every day. You had to be someplace every day, and you're going to be busy. And then you're retired, and you really don't got to be any place other than out of the house, is what my wife said. So other than that, I could do pretty much anything I wanted to do. And then at the same time, turning 65 just a few weeks ago, I think the age kind of gets me more than the retirement. But, they always say you miss the people. And surprisingly, I don't miss all of them. But I do miss, there are some that I absolutely miss. I miss some operations guys and I miss the firefighters, fire captains, chief officers, but I don't miss too much of the city managers and HR directors and deputy city managers. They're all nice people but I didn't have a lot in common with them other than the workplace, and we spent a lot of our time disagreeing about how we in our fire service needed resources. And of course they had a bigger city they had to look at, so a larger view of the city, so they didn't think everything I thought was important, right? So, but being retired is interesting. But fortunately for me, I've known Nick Brunacini for probably about 40 years. If you've heard me talk, I was hired in 1977 with the Phoenix Fire Department, and Alan Brunacini was the assistant chief at the time. And so shortly after I was hired, he was promoted to fire chief, and I had the same fire chief for 28 years, and then only worked for really one other fire chief, the guy that replaced him. So, I had the best boss that you could possibly have. And being a fire chief the last 15 years and having bosses that didn't think like Brunacini was difficult for me. That was probably more about me than it was about them, honestly. So anyway, knowing Nick for all that time, and as soon as I retired, we talked a lot about, because we're friends, is there a role in Blue Card for me as a fire chief? And thank God he found something. And what he did is he had an office full. And Nick's here, and I'll let him jump in. But he had an office full of cardboard boxes, and every one of those was filled with all kinds of information that Bruno had written or collected over the years. And it's amazing. He started collecting long before I became a firefighter in 77, and he didn't throw anything away. He was definitely a fire chief hoarder. Right? Mm-hmm. He kept all of that. So Nick asked me if I wouldn't mind kind of going through the leadership documents and all the information and seeing what was useful for maybe a leadership class coming up. We'd spoke about that before. And even Bruno, back when he was with the Phoenix Fire Department, he had talked about, he had the Command Training Center, and we started talking about the Management Training Center. And he wanted the Management Training Center to look a lot like the Command Training Center, where you'd go in and you had a curriculum that kind of drove the training, and people could come in and teach to the curriculum and become better fire officers and better command officers, just like on the hazard zone. So Nick asked me to do that, and that's kind of what I've been doing. If you've seen any of Bruno's books, of course, you've seen the Anatomy and Physiology of Leadership. We're looking at that. He had a book that was pretty much completed called Functional Boss Behaviors. He had another book that he pretty much completed called No-Brainer Management, and about 6 or 7 other I think they were books he was working on in different classes that he had taught. And then he collected all the stuff that, as he traveled around, people would hand him interesting articles about leadership and all kinds of information. He kept all that. So my job right now is working with Blue Card, coming in a couple days a week or working at home. And I think we pretty much got through the boxes, right, Nick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we got through the boxes, and we're kind of narrowing it down in a kind of a scope of a class that we would like to teach, but that's keeping me busy. But you can imagine how, I don't want to get too verklempt here, but I get to sit in my office here at the CTC, and I'm reading stuff that Brunacini wrote back in the 80s, like 1984, about his thoughts on leadership. And even before that, even when he was at Oklahoma State and some of his papers on that, man, it's just like, for me, it's very nostalgic, but at the same time, there's just so much information there. I think the biggest challenge that Nick and I are going to have, see, there's some language. The biggest challenge for us really is, what do we use and what do we kind of put on hold for a while? So that's keeping me incredibly busy, and I'm loving it. So retirement's good. It's everything that is cracked up to be. I would say do it sooner rather than later if you got a physical activity that you like to do. Like I like to mountain bike, and I wish I would have retired about 3 years ago. I could have got in a few more rides every week. Now I got to rest. I ride and then I rest a day. I used to ride every day. So if you got something you like to do, don't wait too long.
So what's the first product do you think we're going to see out of what you guys are working on leadership wise? What do you think is going to be the first thing that we get to read or get to see what you're doing?
So honestly, there's so much of it now. We haven't really, and I'm looking at Nick though, but we haven't really got a first yet. There's so much. I think the document that is kind of driving everything, the primary document that we're going to focus on the most, well, there's 2 of them. It's the No-Brainer Management, and it's an 8-section textbook that he wrote, and it talks about, it describes his philosophy and some of the things he learned about behavior management, performance management, focusing on the customer. I think that's going to be where we start is with that. And it's good. There's so much information that we're going to have to, the biggest challenge we have is making it digestible, right? Eating the elephant, giving it a little bit at a time. So jump in, Nick.
Yeah, what are there, about 6 modules to the no-brainer management?
Yeah, there's 8.
There's 8 modules there. So the first one is the work, and kind of, and that's the way we're putting the thing together. So it starts with the work, as you build an organization around the work you do. And then, like Terry said, it goes into like the kind of people you have working for you. So just like the way that you hire, train, prepare the workforce to go out and do the work, and then that piece of it. And then it kind of goes beyond like training people. You select people into the organization that have the same values as you. You can't train people into values. That's the way they were raised. So you're trying to find like-minded individuals to come in and be part of this unique culture that we have of delivering service in a variety of places that include IDLH hazard zones. So it's really just kind of like the care and feeding of a fire department, if you will, pretty much. So
yeah, just about that and about the front end of that. Everybody's had a challenge with trying to find employees that really care about their customers, right? They care about each other. Now, it's easy to go out and find people, oh, yeah, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a hero. I want to run in a building. You get a lot of that. There's a lot of testosterone built around that. But really the challenges that I saw as a fire chief, other than on the hazard zone, was really, do you have the values that match the work we do? Because so many of the calls we go on, they're not emergencies. They're not major emergencies to the firefighters. So now how does the firefighter stay engaged when they're showing up at these kind of calls? And it's a challenge for us. We should understand that people join the fire service for that fight in the fire and then end up 20 hours a day treating people for minor issues that you would think that maybe they don't even need us. And then how do you keep your workforce engaged and how do you get them motivated? So really the mindset of the employee coming in on the front end is really important.
Well, like you said, it's the expectations. As I joined up to do this and we end up doing this instead. But, it's kind of weird to hear these arguments because they said, well, when you joined, you're like, well, yeah, when we joined, we went on stupid EMS calls, just like you're going on right now, as we defined them as that. It's, so it's what you do for a living. I mean, get used to it. You got to have a routine where you go off and you can do that successfully. So one of the things I found out during my career is you were going to go on the call one way or another. When the light came on, you went out and got on the truck and went on the call. So you had two choices. I'm going to go educate the citizen not to call us for this ever again, or I'm going to show up, figure out what's going on, and then figure out what we need to do, and then we're going to do what we were doing before. So you can be an asshole or you can go deal with whatever it was, leave everybody happy and go home. So that's kind of
what we see is so many times people become assholes on these calls, or it's their 15th call of the day and it's 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. Careers ending. I mean, I just know of a career ending for a firefighter that they had a frequent caller. They went and took care of the person. He berated the person when they got there. Then that person got on social media and blasted the fire department about the uncouth firefighter that showed up and tried to educate her. She didn't like that. That firefighter then engaged on social media back in the argument. So it was like one nail in the coffin, 2 nails in the coffin. How do we stop that from happening? How do we get people centered on what the mission is and keep them focused on that, even during those days where they may not want to be focused on it?
Well, I think that's what part of this training is going to do, is that you can identify how to act, right? You can identify how to act on EMS calls, just like you identify how to act on the fire ground to be safe. Like you said it, that you got a guy who's going to lose his job. That person lost their occupation because they were a knucklehead, right? Or my wife would say a wackadoodle. How can we teach them? So first of all, hire people that have the values, and then understand that when they go out after a few years or even however many calls, they reach the point where they're just getting kind of tired of it and aggravated with it. You got to have some sort of training program in place to say, here's what you do, here's how you look, and here's the consequences if you don't do the right thing. We had something that happened here in the Valley. It just happened about, I don't know, I can talk about it because it happened with the fire department that were sitting in their city. And they had an incident where they went on a call that they didn't think was that critical. And they were being videoed by the ring bell as they arrived on the scene, and all the things that are said when you're standing at the front door before you go in. Now, I have done that, right? I always felt like I was pretty good at really treating the customer really well and being very polite in front of them. But as soon as I walked away, I said, what a dumbass. Well, you can't even do that now. You need to be able to be trained on there's a camera everywhere at all time. Not to be paranoid, but use that as a lesson as, hey, guys, we need to be very careful with this. So I think we could kind of walk through these type of incidents, EMS calls, and then train people on how to act appropriately by, hey, and then use it's risk management for your career, right?
Well, and you see it just across the 911 spectrum. is like the police go on a bunch of calls that the police were never intended to go on. The social ills and mental health emergencies. I mean, the police just don't have the training for that in most places. And so there's no one else to take it. So it's either them or us. So a lot of this came to us by default. It's like we never signed up for it. It's like, okay, we do EMS. Well, that's emergency medical service. You've been sick since Vietnam. I mean, this is very chronic. So it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, though, is we can't show up and be assholes. It just isn't who we. If you ordered a pizza from Domino's and they show up with it, and you open the door, and they throw it in your face, you're not going to get use of it anymore.
Here you go, fatty.
Yeah, you asshole. Yeah, are you tipping? Sure, I'm going to tip over. So. Yeah, but we don't see ourselves as that a lot of times. It's like you get firefighters just show up and they're like, no, I have to educate this person because it's the right thing for me to do for society. And you're like, no, the right thing for you to do society is never speak again. Just follow your captain and just nod. Thank you.
Well, remember when we used to educate them as we drove our fire engines with lights and sirens? If somebody didn't get out of the way, we would educate them.
Oh, yeah.
And how would we do that?
Oh, you get right behind them and just lay on the air horn.
Their ass and just push them almost completely off the road. And then you get up next to them, you feel so proud of yourself, and you look down and it's grandma, and she's scared to death and wet the seat. And
and again, you're wondering, I'm going on a check a smell. Why am I launching my 28-ton fire apparatus, Warp 3, through the city of Phoenix? It's stupid. The other day, Vance and I were going somewhere, and there was an ambulance ahead of us. So we waited, and it passed us, and went on, and we followed that goddamn ambulance for probably the next 5 miles. I could have passed that thing 3 times if they wouldn't have had their lights and sirens on. And you're like, all the traffic's keeping up with you, pal. I don't know if you're getting this, but... Yeah, I don't know if it's age, but when I got in a BC's rig, I never turned a siren on again. I would follow the response, and I would get there. There's smoke on the horizon, so you could imagine what that looked like. I'd pull up 10 seconds behind them.
Well, Nick, so the important thing in that statement is you drove like you didn't have lights and sirens on too, though. Like
I did. I stopped.
You drove with the traffic.
Yeah. I kept up. I did the whole thing. I stopped at red lights. I didn't. Yeah.
So now we've transitioned into kind of response. But back to seriously, I really believe, and you said it a little bit, and we've had, people just don't. This is what the arguments I keep having with city managers I work for is because I continue to argue that firefighters are really good people and the job they do is really important. And then the city manager will pull out something that he's been holding on to for the last hour waiting for me. And well, what about this guy? And he'll throw it down, and it's a firefighter who is an asshole to a customer. And then I have to present that, right? I have to defend that. And that's irritating. So what Bruno used to say is that, people shouldn't have to qualify for our service. Now, that's the first thing. Doesn't matter how they smell, doesn't matter how they look, doesn't matter if they're sober or not. When we get there, Nick said it. Hey, you go in, you treat the call, and you get over with it. That's the conversations I have with city managers is, yes, you're absolutely right. That firefighter shouldn't have done that. We got a process to work that firefighter through and educate him, and we can do all of that. But we need to get better at understanding that city managers, and I'm coming from a fire chief's perspective, and you know this too, John, city managers, elected officials, they do not give a shit how many calls we go on in a shift. That's one of the problems that I'm having, the difference between now and when we came on, Nick, is we would go on calls and we were irritated sometimes by the customer because we didn't feel like they really needed us. But now it's happening more and more. They're getting 10 of these, 12 of these calls a shift, and it's just beating the heck out of them, right? So how do we educate our firefighters saying, you know what, city manager, elected officials, nobody gives a shit. You're here for 24. They don't care if you have beds in the fire stations. They want, you're here for 24 hours. You got to go on. Well, I was only mean to them because it was our 12th call and it was 3 o'clock in the morning. Nobody cares, right? Nobody cares.
Yeah.
So we almost got to start training our firefighters to get the mindset is when you work for 24 hours, and I know it's hard if that's what you're doing. Some people do 12-hour shifts, but when you are even, they're doing 48. I don't know how the hell you do that. But you, whatever you're going to suffer through there, you're going to suffer through. And it's really difficult when you're on a fire engine and you got that one negative person because it's so caustic, man. And we got to start dealing with those people. We got to start working those guys through some sort of process too.
I rode on an engine with an officer and a driver who would the entire way, and this is to fire calls, they would be on the intercom and it's, come on, chief, cancel us. Come on, chief, cancel us. The whole way there. And it's like, you guys are completely taking the fun out of this job.
Yeah.
Because you don't want us to get anywhere or do anything. You know, they're not paying us to sit at the fire station all day. They're paying us to provide service. Now, if we get to sit in the fire station, that's great. We get to have great fun in the fire station. We get to work out. Like, how many other jobs out there pay us to actually work out other than being a professional athlete?
Well,
I mean, it's
I'm
a special
pissed off.
thing.
John, they interrupted my workout, those rat bastards.
Yeah.
I was trying to get. I was just about ready to hit my max bench press when they called me. I hate those people.
So going back to hiring the right people, because this has been something lost in translation when I'm talking to HR people, because I always say that we got to hire the right people, and they take that as like a signal, like you just want more white guys in this job. And it's like, no, that's not, I'm not talking about diversity. We need to be diverse. I get that. But I'm talking people who have the culture that fits in with the fire department. How do we quantify that? And how do we match up with the people who are really meant to do this mission?
Well, I don't know. I think in the oral interview is where you in the oral interview is where you select that, those qualities in a person. I don't know how you would do that in a test, really. Is okay, take this written test, and it's going to be your service inclinations. So with an interview, you can actually like get to know the person a little bit before you hire them. But it appears that the problem is getting them into the interview. We're talking about this the last couple of days. But when we came in, it was routine that you would compete against a couple thousand people that were taking the test. And today, I mean, it may only be 500 or 600 taking the test. So the pool has gotten a lot smaller. So the number of candidates has gotten smaller. And that's another challenge with the fire service. It is traditionally, historically, white males. That's who have been firefighters forever. It's generational. I mean, so we did it and said, no, your family's going to join. So it's the same DNA even. Yeah, I'm one to talk. So, and I don't know when that became kind of a knock at some point. Well, look at this. It's just all, you got just this one diversity group of white men. And you think, well, sorry, we will hire anybody. Like you said, we want to hire the right people for the culture. But it seems today in the employment world, it's just hard to hire people. The number of people that are qualified and looking for jobs seems to have shifted to the worker. So it ain't a buyer. It's not a seller's market anymore like it was in real estate. It's all the buyers now get to pick what they're going to have. And it's turned that way for the workforce, which is in a lot of ways very good. I mean, the salaries have gone up and people recognize that. But that's one of the traps we fell in during the last 10 or 15 years was where we mandated that people had to stay and work because we had like fixed staffing numbers, which was a good thing. But indenturing the workforce to do that because you don't have enough people. See, it's all going to have to, we got to continue with the service and the current services we deliver and be able to staff to do all those things. So, I mean, it becomes harder and harder moving forward, I think, in modern world.
So, no, you're absolutely right. So in the fire department that I just worked for, the membership created, and it was labor management process, and they created what they call, and the city manager didn't like this name, but they created a combine. And so when I first got there, I was there for 6 years. When I first got there, it's like, okay, what the hell is this? Are we trying to find the most physically fit firefighters? Because we should be physically fit, but there's more skills that we need than that. And I go, no, well, you got to watch this, Chief. This is pretty incredible. They said, since we started this process, we haven't had to fire anybody. And what the process is if you're going to hire, say, 4 candidates, you bring in 3 times as many candidates as you need. And they're the ones that's already been through the testing process, the physical process, the interview process, and you're getting down to the short list. And like Nick said, there's a lot of difficulties along that road too. But when you get to this point, what you do is they come in on a Friday with their white T-shirts. We spray their name on the back of them. We kind of talk to them about, hey, over the next couple of days, we're going to be doing these activities that are they're firefighting activities. It takes a team to be a firefighter. And then they watch those guys over the next couple of days, and there's fire captains, there's firefighters. It's not run by the union. In fact, we just had it done. I said, no, union president, you can't be there and I can't be there because we don't want to influence anybody. And they would rate these guys, and then they would give them a score. So the best example that success I think I saw in that is they had 2 guys come in, and they were these big, brawny military guys that they look like studs. I mean, you would look at them and say, "Oh yeah, they're going to be great firefighters." Because look at them, right?
Mm-hmm. They came from Central Casting.
Yeah, Santa Claus gets picked every year because that's the guy that fits in the costume, right? He's a Santa Claus. Look at his belly. So. Anyway, they said that those guys came in and they thought these are our superstars. And after about the first morning of everybody doing their team building skills and they do some individual stuff, is these guys, when it was time to clean up before the afternoon, these guys went over and sat in the shade, right? And then they badmouthed some of the other people that weren't as strong as them. So by the end of the first day, they already had a pretty good sense that these 2 guys didn't have the personality traits of being team players, giving to the community, having empathy for other people, all those kind of things that we need as firefighters. And they didn't make and they were both absolutely surprised, and even other people in the class that were selected for the academy were surprised. It's like, you mean I got it and he didn't? No, because when you got done with your skill set, you went over and helped these guys, and then you helped them pick it up, and you got what we were looking for. We're looking for team players, right?
As much as that, you were looking for assholes. Because you thought, okay, there's the team players and there's the assholes.
Oh, yeah, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's separate. It's like cream. It separates from the milk, and you say, okay, there's the ones we're going to keep, and there's the ones. No, I don't need you guys, because at 2 a.m, I know exactly what you're going to do. Yeah, I don't need that on the truck. So thank you for your time.
You heard the funny story about the guys when they were doing the interview process, and there was a city, and what they did is just down the road and outside where the interview process where they put somebody with a flat tire. Yeah. And the firefighters that stopped to help the guy with the flat tire got hired.
I love it.
Think about that.
Yeah.
They're the other guys flying by and flipping them off. Get out of my way. I'm late for an interview. Yeah. These guys were on time. They were early. They were thoughtful. They went over. Says, you need anything to help? Even like, hey, I got a phone. Do you need a phone? Whatever it was. Now, there are cities that are using background checks. I think those are incredibly important. If you should do a background check on your employees. Just about everybody does, but the fire department hasn't done it. The cops do it. There are some psychological type testing that you should do, maybe if you can afford that. Now, see, the city managers will tell you, hire qualified people, and at the same time, but here's your budget for doing that. So that's kind of one of those you got to argue with them a little bit. It's like there's a sign outside this building and painted on the wall, right? It says, if you don't like the price of education, the cost of education, you see the price of ignorance. Is that the way they say it?
Pretty
right?
close.
I kind of got it. Mm-hmm. But that's the key. So you got to invest a lot of money on the front end of your hiring process. And, but we're terrible too in the fire service. So we hire people, we put them in the academy. we tell them we're all brothers and sisters and we're going to go in together and come out together and we're going to treat each other nice. And then they get to a fire station, they're not allowed to eat at the table because they didn't earn their freaking stripes. It's goofy, right?
Yeah.
Why would we treat each other that way? If we treat each other that way, what do you think how we're going to treat the customer?
I talked to a lateral transfer into a department, and that department, the chief does not shake hands with you until you've completed the academy. And they tell them, don't look at the chief's eye. Don't make eye contact because you haven't earned that yet. And it's like, how do you think these guys are going to turn out? And you're looking at turnover. That department happens to have a pretty high turnover right now. And it's like, well, maybe it starts with the way that you're treating people the day one. You know, you got to set the tone, right? Set the tone on how you're going to. The way you treat them is the way they're going to treat other people when they get out to the field.
I remember the look in Mayor Parker's face in the city of Houston when we were talking about hiring, and she said she'd like to have more female firefighters. I said, so would I. I'd like to have more black firefighters, more Hispanic. I think a more diverse fire department provides a better service. The customer can kind of relate with whoever that person on the scene is. And we got a diverse community. But we talked about quotas. I said, but I don't like quotas, and she didn't either. But when I used the quote that I heard from Bruno so many years ago, she got it. She got that it was that when you follow ugly kids' homes, you'll find ugly parents. I said, that's the way it's got to be organizationally. And at the time, there was some ugly parents within that system, right? And they were isolated, and everybody knew who they were, but they were allowed to be ugly. So one of the things, and organizationally they weren't that way. And I'm sure every department right now, if they're listening out there, they know who the asshole, the captain is. Now in that case, it's unfortunate it was a chief you couldn't look at, but there's fire captains. Nick, you told the story today about the fire captain who had his own plate. Mm-hmm. In the kitchen table. That's my plate. What did the guy do when he got off probation? He broke the plate.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a pleasant thing to watch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we know who those people are.
They're well known.
But we tolerate it. And it's that whole deal. And we might have talked about it last time about, how you manage attitude. Well, that guy, he's just got a bad attitude. Well, no, that's behavior. It's not attitude. When he's treating people inappropriately, he or she, that's not an attitude problem. That's a behavior problem.
Well, it's almost like the deal where the late thing. It's the firefighter's late. Well, you're not supposed to be late. You just shouldn't be late. Well, you're not going to treat everybody the same way that's late. I mean, you're going to find out why they're late. Right. So like there's one guy who's late all the time. It's because he don't give a shit. It's like, I'll get there when I get there. Well, he needs a different set of fixes than the guy who says, oh, I'm late today because my wife's going through chemotherapy and had a really bad morning. And, I thought I'd get here on time. And, see, the guy whose wife had chemotherapy has got to be at work on time, but he has a very good reason that he wasn't that day. And we can help him work through that. Yeah. So it's like, well, if this is going to be ongoing, and it may be, then we need to maybe set something up with the other shift or something. Yeah. Or I know that you may not be here and we'll do it with 3 people or whatever it is. But this is different because you weren't out the night before doing what you were doing, that you're just going to sleep in and be late because it works out better for you. You're not helping anybody in your lateness, and you're screwing the rest of us. So it's kind of, we both knew a BC who a good friend of ours was friends with and always would defend. And the guy was an asshole. And he says, well, he's in pain all the time. You think, well, so what? That's too bad, but he don't get to be a prick to everybody all the time. Mm-hmm. No one's going to like him because of that. So, well, no, it's not his fault. Well, yeah, it is, because he is an asshole. He's not in pain all the time. He is a pain all the time.
I would go to a Chick-fil-A when I was in the city of Glendale as a fire chief, and I do the drive-through, And there was one guy, and he was always nice, and he always had a great attitude. He was a young guy. And it's like, hey, have you thought about being a firefighter? You're the guy we want, right?
Yeah.
That's so you say, what do you do? Where do you get them? Maybe we're looking in the wrong place. Maybe we need to look for people that actually understand that the fire service is a service industry. Yeah. We're a service industry, just like waiters and all those people that help somebody out when they want something, because once again, they paid for that. Well, Mrs. Smith pays her. Well, whether you think they pay their tax or not, it doesn't matter. When they call us, you need to help them.
See, we get paid. That's right. What all you need to understand.
Yeah, you don't need to know where it comes from.
The greatest organizational message I ever received was from the union president. And he did a customer service guide. And it was, I don't know, 36-page deal, a little, 4-inch book the way they delivered it to every member of our organization is they stapled it to our paycheck. I remember sitting in the fire station, and we had about an hour-long discussion about that. And, this is bullshit, and this bullshit call I'm going on, and no. Let's open the other thing. How much did you make this year? Yeah. I happen to know you're illiterate, and illiterate people do not make this much money every year. So, just like that's our culture. And, you could talk to each other that way because you kind of almost love one another. So, but those were very helpful organizational things where the bosses and the leaders of the organization would keep sending that message out. So it became a lot easier for the bosses and supervisors of all in the middle to kind of keep that message fresh and alive.
Bad news travels quicker than good news, and people love to hear bad shit about other people, right?
Oh,
so when you hear organizations and firefighters that are doing something negative, that travels pretty quickly, and people hear about that, and then they wonder, okay, now what happened, and what kind of trouble are they getting in? I don't think we do a very good job of exploiting the good work that people did. We had a guy, Buck Powell, he passed away now. And we used to have a saying, he was so nice to everybody, and the way he treated people and he wasn't a sissy about it. And, he would hold a woman's hand or a 15-year-old kid's hand or whatever, and walk people through whatever hardships they're going through. And he didn't look like a sissy doing it, but it's like we used to say, well, what would Buck do? Right. Mm-hmm. And that was the level. So I think organizationally, we ought to start identifying those people that are really good at it and say, how do you do, instead of identifying the dumbasses and the knuckleheads.
Alan Brunacini used to talk about Larry Powell. And he said he came into his oral interview, and Larry Powell was he played the guitar in a country music band, and
girls loved him.
Oh, and he would sing every now and then. He'd be up there, big guy, blah, blah, blah. And they're talking about some personnel problem in his interview, and they asked him a question. Well, Buck, what would you do if Jimmy did this? And he sat for a minute. He says, well, Chief, I guess I'm just going to have to sing Jimmy a sad song. And he says, that's it. He says he's going to be a captain. Number one. He left, and I think Larry Powell's in the top 5 of his list. And they said, no, that's who we want running the call, is that guy. And he was a tremendous company officer, or as good a company officer you find anywhere.
And then I think sometimes, and I don't know how you do this, but sometimes when you identify people with really bad behavior towards a customer, I think we make excuses for them, and we keep them on, and we put them in places, and we hide them and do that. I think we ought to frickin' deal with them a little bit more, because if you deal with them in a fair, help them up. They'll saying, I'm going to help you up and show you to the door is what I'm going to do, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. A little bit of second chance management is a great way to go with that. I had several of those in the fire department I used to work for. It was like, hey, man, you can't treat people like that. Well, why not? Well, first of all, we got a book, the HFD accountability model that talks about how it describes how we treat each other. And you'll see that in the magazine coming up, right? Mm-hmm. And this is the behavior that we're asking to portray, and that's nowhere in there. So you can't do that again. And if you do it again, it's going to have consequences and repercussions. But you got to identify, just like on the fire ground, you got to identify the appropriate behavior. Then you got to identify the inappropriate behavior. And then you got to have a process to deal with the inappropriate behavior. And like Dick says, that process, it doesn't have to be so linear that everybody gets the same axe and their heads come off. You got to kind of look into the totality of the situation.
It's a different set of critical factors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a different fix for it. So is somebody's late for a reason that's easy to fix and support, and somebody's late for a set that is just unacceptable and we're not going to do it anymore. Because if you keep being late for these reasons, you are not going to be a good employee here. You're going to become addicted. You're not going to be on time. Your health is going to go to shit. Your mental, all of this leads to that's where the substance abuse people come in. Look for these things: leave abuse, lateness, indifference, big personality, all that stuff. Well, as a BC, and that kind of gives you the measuring stick of what you're going to use to manage your crews.
Yep.
So the most powerful thing we had probably were customer complaints. Is we would get citizens' complaints in, and they would go to the BCs. So, and each BC would deal with them however they dealt with them. Most of them could give a shit, and they thought, this is wasting my time. Well, half the customer complaints were really not complaints. It was people that had questions about our operations that they needed explained to them. They didn't need to file a complaint. They're going with their lights and siren, and they get through the intersection, and then they turn them off and just turn down a side street. Why would they do that? Well, because they were canceled on the call, and they didn't want to turn it off in the middle because it would have probably caused an accident, so they wait till they're all the way through, and then they did what they did. Oh, well, thank you for that. They didn't need me calling them back saying, Engine 40 did this. So the other half of them were things that you needed to deal with. So it was the same thing as going on calls. Yeah. So it's like, half the calls I go on bullshit, so I'm going to treat them all like that. Well, it's like, no, that's not the way this works, is they all have a different set of factors. So you would get complaints that were legitimate, and then you could deal with those. And you would sit down, and they'd look at you like, and I remember about the third or fourth time I did this where it was something, and I was dealing with an asshole that needed his boss to talk to him about not being an asshole anymore. And it was probably the third time, and I was about halfway through what I was going to do with this asshole. And he figured out, he thought, you're going to discipline me right now. I said, that's kind of why we're meeting, right? Uh-huh. Yeah. You're wearing your fire department uniform, putting gas in your car, and you start vilifying some woman over religious garb she's wearing at the pump next to you, pal. Oh. Yeah, we're going to have a long talk about this. Yeah. So he expected the outcome of that. And I mean, it wasn't fatal, but it was like, no, this is the first. And because I've known you for 15 years, and I know you're going to do this over and over. And the next time you do it, you're not going to do it over and over because you're going to have a different captain because you're not going to be the captain anymore. So, I mean, it's just those kind of things. Well, he understood he was wrong, and he knew, well, that was probably inappropriate. I shouldn't have said that to her. And, I agree. And you're like, well, no, we're just starting our relationship, Jeff, today. So, me and Engine 15 are going to be real close for the next couple months.
I just think it's really interesting that, so just pick any number. You got 100 firefighters. You may have 10 of them that are assholes. And everybody in the organization knows they're an asshole, and everybody tolerates that the way they are. And
they enable it.
And then everybody works around them. Mm-hmm. That's what we have to do organizationally is we gotta, because what's happening is the other 90 people have to suffer through that. So as a fire chief, I always felt like my job was to, if there's some knuckleheads out there being assholes, I was responsible to the other 90. It's like, no, I gotta take care of this. We got to get bosses in place and align our plan and get this person straight or get them out, because the other 90% of the people, or the other 90 people, are like, wow, you can get away with that crap. well, maybe I'll start acting like that. And everybody dummies down and they reach that level of,
Well, the other thing I found out is when you start dealing with them, is the first thing they say is, well, that's bullshit because this guy over here does it 4 times as bad as I do. I think, no. I ain't his boss, pal. This is today. So, or they'll start with you. So Nick Brunacini's coming here and lecturing me, and you need to take a message from that. If I'm coming out telling you, this is like the final cry for help for you. Yeah, I'm your last advocate in this one, pal. Yeah, as Pete Hobel would say, you got to know sin to fight sin. Yeah.
So where's the line at where you cut bait, demote versus second chance? When do you get a second chance?
So I personally don't like demotions at all. Because all you've done is you've you've lowered that person in rank, but they're still in the organization. Now you got an angry person.
The gift that keeps giving.
Yeah. So I love the second chance, and that's what I used a lot in Houston. And it was in Houston. I had lawyers on staff, and they loved the second chance because I could tell you we would have somebody come in and I would, whatever the issue was, and it's a whole process, louder mail and all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to get into here, but at the end of the day, it was a second chance and I would say, okay, you sign this agreement. If you violate something similar to this in the next 1 year to 3 years, depending on the severity of the offense, then you get released or terminated without any opportunity to appeal. That was awesome because when they left, I would look over at whatever chief I had in there and attorney, and I go, "What do you think? 6 months we'll see him back? Nah, probably 3." Or you'd say that we won't see that guy again. He's not coming back. He's actually contrite and doesn't want to get involved with this at all. He made a mistake, but it was a great process, and I hate firing people. You hate to do that to anybody.
It's the worst.
But I always think about, it's too bad your wife married you because you're such an asshole. You just lost your income.
Yeah.
And now your wife and your kids and everything that goes on with that, you're responsible for that. I'm not, right? So it's no fun, but when the second chance works really well. The demotions, I've tried those. I've seen those. To me, they just don't, unless somebody has a real, if it's a performance issue where they just can't, like we have engineers that you can't find the address, or fire captains that just aren't able to supervise, or maybe they're good firefighters, but they're just incompetent in their position. They can't fill that role. But usually those people are ready to self-demote.
That's true. They do
right?
most of the time. Most of the demotions that happened, at least when we were working together, it was 90% of them were the employees said, "I don't like this new position. Please demote me."
And you could see the relief off their faces.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah. It was mostly from captain to chief. They would promote to battalion chief. They say, "I don't like this job at all. I don't belong here." And they go back, and they were better captains after they demoted themselves.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
What do you think? You're a chief.
Well, number one, firing somebody is the most difficult thing I think I've ever gone through in my life. And I've had to do it a few times, and it sucks. And I'm full of empathy, so I feel bad for the family and everybody. Like you worry about, like, do you realize you just lost health care for your family? You just lost a pension. You just, and typically it's after a second chance. I mean, these guys have all, most of the time, had a second chance, and it's the third DUI or, the whatever, you get into these situations where just, it's not going to turn out well. The demotions I agree with too, man. If you're the fire chief and you demote people, it's like you've got an enemy for life. I mean, that person is just going to be miserable and sit back and try to poke a hole into everything. And I think I submit to you at the beginning of our conversation, we've got to hire the right people so we don't run into these situations. And interestingly enough, one of our battalion chiefs just went to a recruitment seminar, and they said, you guys, if you're putting action shots, if your whole brochure for your fire department is nothing but people in turnout gear, putting water on fire, breaking windows, climbing ladders, you're doing it wrong. You need to have, and you got to stage these pictures, but them holding a hand of somebody or taking care of somebody, more of a medical call or helping somebody out. Show them helping, not just all this action stuff that is going to only appeal to one group of people.
Well, I think one of the things that happened to us is we're all of the age in the generation where we have a different set of experiences than everybody who's come after us. I mean, education changed, everything changed. But you would hear it, especially like 15 or so years ago, it was like the new people were hiring. They would talk about these new recruits. They're just not there yet. They don't have the life experiences. They don't have the work experiences or whatever it is. So that was I just forgot what I was going to say.
The big one
just drifted.
No, it's people complaining about your recruits. And the big thing we were getting for a while, about 20 years ago, was these guys don't know how to start a saw. They weren't in the trades. They don't know they don't know how buildings are made.
They think screwdrivers are pluses and minuses. You think, well, they kind of are, aren't they?
Yeah. It's not a bad way to look at it. Give me the minus.
Yeah.
But you go ahead.
But it's up to us to train them how to run that saw, how to fix something, because I happen to believe that most of the people we're getting have a higher emotional intelligence than any of the people I worked with 30 years ago. They're smarter, they're better educated, they know how to do things. And if you can find the right ones that are empathetic, that understand our mission, that are customer service focused, they're going to be great.
I'm going to say the most profound thing you've ever heard on this radio right now. If you want to really hire nice people, treat the people that are already working there nice. Because what I've heard lately, I just worked for an organization where they're known to be nice. Am I right, Nick?
Yeah, oh yeah.
The Glendale Fire Department, I'll say it right here. Yeah. They're a nice group of people. They're nice to each other. They're nice to the customer. They even argue nice. It kind of irritates the shit out of me sometimes. They're just nice people. And what we were doing is we were getting more recruits than the other cities because it's like, well, that big city over there, they're not nice to each other. So if you're getting people that you feel like they're coming in and they're kind of knuckleheads, probably because that they want to hang around other knuckleheads, right? But if you're getting people that are good quality people, they're hearing, nobody comes in without hearing what's going on in the city. They do their research now, like you said, they're very smart people. They ride along, they see how you're treating each other, they see how you're treating the customer, and they may not want to be a part of your organization. They're going someplace else.
Somebody told me a story the other day. During our careers, we had a lot of people join our organization from other fire departments. And I heard the other day, several people from a bigger fire department here in the Valley joined a smaller fire department to kind of follow up on your niceness thing.
Well, and the other thing too, Nick, that's true. And what I found is the new generation, I don't know if you've seen this, they're loyal to the job, not to the organization. Mm-hmm. So they will leave a department to go to another department without much thought about it. And their buddies are all over the place anyway, mm-hmm. so they're not really as connected as we used to be.
I kind of feel the same way as they do, to be honest with you.
Yeah?
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's the work you do and then the people you connect with.
Yeah.
So they all say fire department at the end. Whatever comes first is just interesting for most of us.
But it used to be like you would want a certain fire department.
Oh, I want to go to Phoenix, or I want to go to New York, or I want to go to Houston. I'm going to go to the Big Red and wherever I'm at. But
a lot of those organizations had a mystique wrapped up around them too. Some of that shine.
They got a smell about them.
Yeah.
But it is interesting how the newer generation, I don't know how to say that because that's inappropriate, however I say it. But like you said,
no,
Nick,
it's all
we're
appropriate.
old, so we're charming.
Yeah, exactly. We're old and charming, so cancel us, bitch. Yeah.
But anyways, they have left, and we've had people leave Glendale to go to other fire departments. Mm-hmm. It just didn't work out for them. It's like, no, my brother-in-law works over here. This work, like you say, it's about the relationships at the department. But when we're at the generation, and maybe some people on the line listen, once you got into a fire department, you never leave. That isn't happening anymore. Yeah. They're staying in the fire service and going to different departments.
Yeah. We were pretty fortunate. We were talking about that today. once every 3 or 4 months, I get together with the recruit class of mine, and we all talk about how fortunate we
And
were.
how many years ago was that?
40 years ago.
Yeah.
40 years ago. And half of us were there, so half of us are still alive.
Nice.
Yeah. No, we were talking about how good our careers were. You know, I think it was a different time. First of all, it was 1980. We started, and it was, you could be stinky and poopy. You just couldn't be an asshole, and you were accepted. Pretty much. I don't know. It was a different thing. It was more occupational and tradey back then. I don't know. I think today, if the three of us were just starting off, we would have a similar experience in our career. I mean, people want to go, you should be able to have fun at work. I mean, that's a huge key to it. That's why you're happy.
Oh, it's funny because I was in Houston, and you got all the mayor threw on like a 3-day, you know how you do these team building deals? We did all these exercises and everything. And then at the end of it, they had these votes. Like, so I got voted as the most nice. And the mayor says, she goes, Terry, and I was only there for about a year, but she goes, you got voted like the most nice out of all our department directors. Why are you so nice? I said, I grew up in a tough neighborhood. If I wasn't nice, I'd get my ass kicked. I had to be nice to everybody, right? Once you're nice to somebody, you got to be nice to everybody. But I don't know. I think there's probably more people need their ass kicked sometimes, but yeah, I just think you are either a nice person or not. Now, when I went to that department too, and it sounds like I say I a lot and tell a lot of stories, but it's all I know, right? All I got is all I got. But I was selecting assistant chiefs there, and somebody asked me, they said, so how did you had 70 people apply for 12 assistant chief positions. How did you select who you were going to work with, or who are you going to get? And I said, first of all, they kind of had to have a skill set. They had to be able to read and write and speak English pretty well. But I said, but also at the end of the day, it was like, I don't know how long I'm going to be in Houston, so I'm going to try to pick people I like being around. Mm-hmm. They were kind of entertaining, and they had good personalities. And it's like, well, I don't know, I may only be here a year. Ended up being here over 5, but it's like, I'm going to pick people that seem like, so we did a study, Brunacini, I remember he taught this, Nick, is they were talking about firefighter traits and skill sets, and the number one most desirable trait for a firefighter was a sense of humor.
Yeah.
True story.
So that would make if you're interviewing firefighters, I believe that would be
But it's not the mean humor and the hurtful humor. It's like you got, because a lot of the best humor is self-deprecating.
Oh, exactly.
Right? So,
yeah, man.
So if you just think about select people, so I think we interview sometimes and we're looking across and we got a panel and we're looking for answers and the right bullet points, and we're way too good at it in the Valley because everybody's trained on interviews. But wouldn't you just look for somebody that's like, are you a nice person? That would be, they'll trick you, right? There's narcissists out there pretty good at tricking you. But I think you can kind of tell when somebody's fairly.
We were at a labor management meeting, and they were talking about hiring firefighters. And, how do we do it? And I mean, they're all over the page. We get young ones, get old ones, the good versus bad. And Whaley was my fit at the time. Mm-hmm. And so somebody's writing on the board, and there's, we need this quality and this quality. And so they get done with this thing, and it looks like a college thesis on selecting firefighters. And Whaley says, yeah, that's all really good and well. He says, I've worked on 725. We got a recruit spot on it. And he says, you know what I look for? He says, if I can spend 24 hours with them, that's number one. If I can spend a whole shift, if they don't stink, they don't slobber on themselves and have boogers hanging out their nose, and they just, respond normally, like the right answers, let's start there, okay? And then he kind of works backwards. That's it.
A couple of crews that I worked with, and I think it's the best compliment I've ever gotten, and this was as a firefighter, but I've had guys say, my best year at work was when you were my partner and we were working
Oh, how
together.
fun is that?
Because we had a good time.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
And having a good time wasn't at anyone's expense. We liked going on calls. We went and delivered service, but we would have fabulous meals. We would joke around. I would play things over the PA system. I mean, we were having fun at work and not at anyone's expense.
It was the greatest occupation that exists in the history of work.
How would you like Brunacini, Alan Brunacini, to tell you, you okay today? You in a good mood? Yeah, why? You just don't seem like you're in a good mood. I'm in a good mood, but why don't you tell your face? He told that to somebody.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we had a fire chief that he would tell people to be nice, but then he would kind of call them on it if they weren't.
Good.
Well, and they'd say, well, what about you? You were pissed the other day. He says, oh, no. Every morning I get up for work, I put on this costume I wear. And he says, and I get in that red caprice they give me with the lights and sirens. And he says, when I'm about halfway to work, I piss a big, giant wet spot in my front seat because I'm so happy where I'm going. And you think, yeah, okay, well, I'll work for him. Yeah, Randall Dunn says, no, you tell us what we need to do. He says, that's what I do. I'm insubordinate, but I will listen to your direction. So
Yeah,
I mean, that was kind of, crazy Randall.
So one last question before we wrap up. How do you last? How did Alan Brunacini last 28 years being a fire chief? When we talk about longevity, a couple episodes ago, we're talking about how this is more like a football coach. And if you got a winning team, you tend to stick around. But how do you have that kind of longevity now? Is it possible even?
You can't ask me, apparently. I got a lot of stars on my door up there. So I was, it's weird because I developed a habit when I was a firefighter. About every 3 to 4 years, I'd want to go to a new fire station. It was just kind of I got tired of going on the calls turning right. The fire station, all your calls are either that way or that neighborhood. And it wasn't the people. I always enjoyed the people, but it's like I just seemed like I needed to move to another fire station. Then I'd promote and move to another fire, whatever. But as a fire chief, it looks like for whatever reason, I'm about a 6-year fire chief in my jobs. I get after about 6 years, I feel like for me, it's like, man, I think I really have done enough to help move this organization forward. Maybe they need somebody new to come in with new ideas and some new thought processes. And usually what I would love to see and what I would hope for in the past is they would pick an inside guy and kind of move that person up. Because I came as the outside fire chief in a couple, and I feel like my job there was to spend a few years and get the inside guys ready so they can kind of keep that organization moving forward. So I always opted for the inside guy, but I don't know how. I think it's like a quarterback. I don't know how quarterbacks in the NFL can throw an interception and then go sit on a bench and then come back and have to throw another. They got to keep playing, right? They threw an interception that was a pick six, and they got to come back and.
Oh, come on, Terry, please! You were a paramedic, right? Did
Yeah.
every one of your patients live?
You know what? I didn't see him long enough.
Exactly.
Yeah,
How long's an interception last? Yeah, I threw 87 passes. They picked one off. Yeah, I've known paramedics. Well, the people that I know that have. Killing is the wrong word, but they have witnessed the most death are paramedics.
Oh, yeah.
More than any serial killer, any soldier, anybody. Paramedics, long-term paramedic is thousands of people during their lives.
Nick has set it up. Back to your question, so you don't really quit the job, you quit your boss, right? You said that before.
Yeah.
That's the same thing with a fire chief. When you get to a point where it's like, I can't outperform. In Oceanside, I had the boss and I didn't get along. And it's like, I can't outperform this guy. I've tried everything. All I'm doing is pissing him off, and he's being meaner to the firefighters with resources and budgets, and council members are frustrated. Him and I didn't get along so well that it was impacting the fire department in a negative way. I felt like the best thing I could do is to move out of the way and then get somebody. Maybe you can get along with him. You dance with her because I'm stepping on her feet apparently. But I don't know how a fire chief does 28 years. I did 15 years as the fire chief, but it was in a couple of organizations, and about 5 or 6 years. Now in Houston, I really felt like if the mayor would have stayed and if things would have kept moving forward, I would have stayed there longer, just because there was so much to do. It's such a large organization, so many moving parts that it just kept me busy and energized all the time. And, we had our tragic losses, but I was, honestly, I was glad I was there for those, because it sounds so terrible, but it's like they needed somebody who experienced something like we did with Brett Tarver. It was a recovery process for us, and it's like, I'm glad I'm here because I've been through that before. But I liked Houston. I think I could have stayed there for a few more years. They got a new mayor, and boy, him and I certainly wouldn't have got along. And that fire chief they have now, he works for the mayor, and I always felt like I worked for the fire. And I'm not being mean-spirited about that, but there's fire chiefs that their perception is they work for firefighters, and there's fire chiefs that they work for the mayor or the city manager. And I felt like I always worked for the firefighters. And when I got to the point where I felt like I couldn't do much more for them, and I was struggling with that, then I would look around and say, maybe that guy would do better organizationally, and kind of give him a chance to do that, right?
Yeah. But I don't know. For the AVB, he started in 1958. So how many people are on the fire department then? 250 maybe, probably, in the Phoenix. And then when he left, there was probably 2,200 on the fire department. So he actually kind of and was he the most senior guy when he retired? I don't know if he was.
I'm not sure. Maybe not.
There may have been one or two more ahead of him, but he was. So he really, probably more than any other fire chief I've known, had a sense of ownership about being the fire chief in Phoenix. I mean, it's almost like I compared it to Tommy Lasorda and the Dodgers, as you can't separate them. And I mean, the two that they've had since then could not separate them, and I think that really kind of was part of the thing that drove them. But So anyway, so for him it was easy. I mean, he wasn't bullshitting when he says our family helping your family. And so my mom used to say this. She says, I go to the hospital, and I have a surgery, and you come visit me for 15 minutes. Some firefighter gets injured, and you go to the hospital and you're with him for 5 hours. I get that. So,
what was interesting about him too? I was there when I was on on the command team. I was a super deputy assigned to supervise Nick. Think about that, guys. And I'm with him just maybe a few weeks or a month before he was getting ready to retire, and he introduced the concept of embedded safety. Like, think about how we have now with blue carders. We have, back then we had safety officers, and he had talked about embedding safety on the fire ground, and kind of the concept of your driver, the battalion chief driver, you could put safety right in there, and that would work. And it was a brand new thought process, and he was throwing it out there. And I thought, and I think everybody in the room thought, it's like, well, isn't he leaving in a month? This is a brand new idea that he's talking about here. And I thought it was a great idea, but he had that ability to have this. The day that he left, he put in a full day's work, right? And those fire chiefs that retire in place and all that kind of stuff, that's terrible. But that wasn't him, but he's staying engaged all the way to the end. I think you should stay a fire chief as long as you're engaged and you're helping the organization, you're supporting your members. How do you do it there, John?
Oh, I think you go back to what you were talking about with the quarterback. I see it happen to other fire chiefs. They get bitter. They get cynical about, either the council or the firefighters or both of them. And they feel like it's them against the world. And they're not sitting on the bench clearing their minds. They're sitting on the bench ruminating on the things that just happened. So I think part of that answer is to be able to move on. And I've been doing this for 21 years now as a chief. Wow. And that's a long time. That's a real long time to do something. I think staying energized every day, keeping engaged with the changes in the service, talking to your people, making sure that you're moving ahead. 1% better every day is what I say. And if we can keep continuous improvement, that energizes the organization. They can look back and say, oh man, remember when we had staffing like this, or remember the equipment that we had. And I think every organization I've been at, we've been able to synergize things to the point where we make that progress. Fortunately, I've had support either from the community or from my bosses to do that. I feel really bad for these fire chiefs that, they want to be a fire chief so bad. So they take that gig in hell where you're working for a rotten boss, or you're working for a community that has had a lot of bad dealings with the fire department. So they're not going to support you, or the union is, you just get in these different situations where it's trouble all around. I've been fortunate that I've had great support where I'm at. We always have our stumbles and stuff, but I think longevity, in my case, has been being able to continue improvement without getting stuck.
So when I'm going through Brunacini's documents, and this will be part of the class as Nick and I go out and start teaching it, is there was a statement that I came across, and it's beautiful. It's so success isn't final and failure isn't fatal. Right. So I love that. The fact that, you're a fire chief, you've reached the pinnacle of your career. That's not fun. You don't quit, right? That's where you continue to work hard and keep giving back. Like you said, even if it's just 1%, 1%, you keep moving forward. And along the way, you're going to have some things that seem really fatal to you. Like you didn't get something passed or something didn't work out for you. That's not final. You can move past that like a quarterback moves past an interception. So for me, I honestly, I was at the point that I just retired because honestly, it sounds goofy, but I'm 65 years old. And I didn't want to be the old guy in the corner that, was drooling on myself. I just felt like it was time to move on. And I probably got more caught up in the age than anything else. And then after I left, I felt terrible for leaving. It's like, I should have stayed another year. I should have stayed another whatever, right? But, I think it's real. If you leave as a fire chief, make it more about something personal in your life, not something in your job. Right? Does that make sense?
Because you're going to look back and regret it. There's going to be more regrets if you let the job force you out.
Don't let the
you
job
weren't tenacious enough to get through a bad situation. And really, on the flip side of what you're saying too, getting through the bad stuff. There are a lot of fire chiefs who will break their own arm, pat themselves on the back, and their ego gets so big.
That's right.
That they don't stay humble either. And I think there's another key component to this is staying humble. And it is not about you as the fire chief. You're not. You may be the leader of the organization, but the organization shouldn't be you. You got to shine the light on everybody else.
Yeah, that fire chief that you said that you can't shake his hand or look him in the eye. You got to punch him in the gut, right? What a dumbass. Thank God I haven't run across too many fire chiefs like that. Usually the jobs that I've seen, the fire chiefs just want to do a good job, and they're trying to get through the day, and they're doing the best they can, right? But there are knuckleheads in organizations at all levels who have they're ego driven, and that's unfortunate. But you got to identify them like we talked about early on, and you got to have a process to identify what proper behavior is, which is proper actions, and then you got to hold people to those, and you can't let them slip. It's not okay to be an asshole to Mrs. Smith. It's not okay to be an asshole to fellow firefighters. I was an asshole to a city manager one time early in my career. I was 49 years old when I got my first fire chief job, and probably wasn't mature enough for it at that time, and pretty much told the city manager what I thought. Well, later on I found out that you can think a lot of things and you don't have to actually tell them. You can look a guy right in the eye and think about how you'd like to shove his phone up his ass, but you don't actually have to tell him that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But I think you're right. It is you quit bad bosses. And then you got the thing like you talk about, Vance, where like at the end of your career, you get bitter about shit. Well, if you got a bad boss, it just kind of feeds into the thing. So, and what's crazy is you think, okay, this guy's a moron and this is bullshit. I could be doing this and this instead. But then you start thinking about it and you think, well, overall, man, I have really stole my career. This has been money the whole way. I got no right to be pissed off, to be honest with you, with the amount that I ate while I was here. It was just too good. There was too much joy that came out of it to be pissed off at it for very long.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. If you're a fire chief and you're getting frustrated and you're sitting in your office, go visit a fire station because they got energy that'll bring you up and make you feel completely good about having that job, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of
the biggest problem fire chiefs have, and we'll talk about it maybe next time, is you always need somebody to call bullshit on you.
Yeah.
Like when I promoted to fire captain, I went home to tell my mom, I got promoted to fire captain. She says, big balls and cow time. Like, well, yeah, you ain't that great. Sit back down,
Yeah.
And you need that person. And I married a woman like that when she called bullshit on me whenever I get a little cocky. And you need that. You need firefight, a PIO in the job I just left. And she was one of those who would say, I say, what do you think of that? And she goes, that's not good, Chief. You need those people in your life.
I married a girl from New Jersey. I get a lot of humility.
Oh, yeah.
Dosed out my way. Yeah.
Humility, I would say, fire chief, be more humble, which is less prideful. Be more in the present, right? Because you're always looking to the next day and the next project, the next thing. Just
or the
enjoy
past too.
Yeah.
Then this happened. I can't have this
bastards.
happen.
Yeah, be in the present and then be patient with people because that's just it. Most people are just trying to get through the day, and you're walking, you're at the top of the totem pole. Be patient with people below you. Below you, it doesn't sound right, but be patient with everybody, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. It's been a good conversation, Nick and Terry. Thank you.
JV.
We'll be back here on another Thursday soon.
Yeehaw!